Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
In this thread, we post any UFO or alien experiences any of us have had, be it abduction, close encounters, or just seeing plain weird shit in the sky, and we talk about it. Me. I lived for many years around airports. In fact, for the past 12 years, I lived in San Diego, which has pretty important military installations. I see Navy helicopters doing training almost daily, day and night. So I'm used to all sorts of aircraft. VTOLs, aka vertical takeoff and landing, large airliners, large military cargo planes, helicopters, private aircraft, you name it. I also love to skywatch at all times, so I also know what satellites, stars, planes, and other natural and man-made objects look like. I have seen metallic spheres at high altitudes during daylight in the mountains east of here. I have seen 5 orange spheres flying in V formation towards the sea at dusk. Odd lights in Mexico. My uncle has also seen some weird shit down south, while he was fishing in a reservoir up in a mountain range known in Baja California for its alleged UFO sightings, and just about a dozen miles south of the border, saw a weird elliptical bright object. It was the middle of the night, and he said that all the usual night critters from the lake, crickets, frogs, birds, and even coyotes went silent. It was almost unnatural. And then from behind a hill, the object came out, and he and his friends saw it for a while, until it shot straight up into the sky and out of sight.
Seen UFOs, seen aliens. I don't like thinking about it because it gives me trouble sleeping and I'm tired. I guess I'll try to do this shit in chronological order, but if I remember something after I pass it up, I'll backtrack. Sometimes I remember shit I had locked away once I start talking about it. The earliest thing I can remember is in 2nd grade. You know those recurring dreams you've been having since before you could remember anything about your waking life. I have one of being in my grandma's car. She's driving me south towards the highway between Vegas and LA. I don't know why we're going that way, but my grandma isn't saying anything in the dream. She's sorta just zoned out and driving. Anyway, I notice in the rear view and the side mirrors that we're being trailed by a silver craft, and point it out, but again, no response. Eventually, she just pulls off to the side of the road in the desert, and the dream ends. What's funny about that dream is that it features a part of Vegas that wasn't really developed when I was a kid. As a result, I never actually remember going there until I could drive, and by then it was all suburbs and shopping. I only knew that part of town was ever undeveloped when I saw pictures of what it used to look like. I saw those when I was a teenager, and it chilled the fuck out of me that what it used to look like matched my old dream. There's no way the knowledge that this place was undeveloped back then, or what it looked like, could retroactively have worked its way into my dreams as a kid. Other than that, my childhood was pretty damn normal in regards to alien and UFO shit until I reached 3rd grade. When my dad remarried and moved me into this new house, I began to have the sensation of flying as I was falling asleep in bed at night. At first, I actually kind of enjoyed that and thought it was maybe a normal part of entering a dream. I had been feeling it occasionally as I fell asleep as far back as I could remember. Well, that shit got put into perspective real fast. The next dream I vividly remember is of being awake late at night and going to the sliding back door. I don't know why I was headed towards the backyard, probably to give the dog water or some shit. Anyway, as soon as I cross that doorway, I feel absolutely paralyzed by this overwhelming fear. There are gray aliens waiting to collect me, and all I want to do is turn back around and go into the house and shut the door, but I can't even move. So they come and get me, and that's all I remember. That was 3rd grade. Still didn't really pay much attention to that shit until around middle school when we moved up north. That's where all the shit that keeps me up at night happened. The house we lived in at the time was in North Las Vegas, right in the shadow of Shadow Mountain, and the two things it was really next to were a bombing range and a hog farm that you could smell every morning. We got plenty of weird aircraft up there as it was. Stealth bombers, jets doing drills, all kinds of shit making low passes in broad daylight and at night. The house was 2 stories, and the 2nd story was basically 2 hallways intersecting in a T-shape with my room, my parents' room, and my sister's rooms located off of that. The second story overlooked the first one via an indoor balcony that basically was the top part of the T. Across from this overlook on the second story were 3 huge windows that you could see the mountains from. Every night you could see the planes doing drills if you looked out those windows, and if you paid attention, you'd notice that they didn't always fly like planes. Sometimes they hovered and darted, and sometimes what you thought was a formation of many smaller lights actually blocked out the stars behind it, meaning that it was actually a solid object. I hated those windows. As soon as we moved into that house, I began to hate both my closet and my bedroom window. The way my shit was arranged at first, my bed was right beneath the window. I couldn't sleep like that, so I overhauled my entire room and put my bed against the other wall. I used to sleep sitting upright with my back against the wall, staring at that window. Sometimes I'd get up and ask my dad to sleep with me, until he got sick of that. When my parents asked what I was afraid of, I'd lie and say that it was burglars. I didn't want to sound nuts. When I finally told my dad the truth, he didn't even tell me that shit was impossible or crazy or ridiculous. He just said that there was nothing we could do about that sort of thing. The reason I had trouble sleeping in that bedroom was because I feared being taken. Most of my memories are from that house. I'd wake up paralyzed with this horrible buzzing like electrified fear in the air around me, and then they'd come. I remember waking up to the sight of one of them looking down at me with those eyes. I remember another time that I was floated out of my bed and to a waiting craft outside. I remember waking up paralyzed, sleeping on my stomach, to the sensation of my covers being slowly peeled from my back. Sometimes I'd fall asleep in one place and wake up someplace else. It made me paranoid and frightened, and I developed strange habits. First, if I ever went to bed, I had to roll myself up into a burrito with my blanket and seal it with my weight by sleeping on the end or tucking it in. Second, I'd usually stay up and stand vigil instead of sleeping. I'd stand on that balcony hallway, across from those windows, at just the right distance so that my shadow wouldn't be cast beneath my parents' door, and I'd wait. I'd literally stand there all night until dawn, counting the minutes and dreading everything if I heard that buzzing. I even left imprints of my feet on that carpet. Sometimes I'd stand in my sister's rooms too, guarding them and holding a knife. Sometimes I'd lock myself in the bathroom and just wait out the night there. I could go on about the weird shit I started doing as I slept less and less. Anyway, after we moved out from that house, that activity kind of slowed down, but it never really went away. Once in high school, I came downstairs to find my front door open and my sister's gone. I went outside to see what the hell was up, and both of them were out front pointing up at the sky. I asked them what they were doing, and they said that the stars were moving. Another time, and this was back in elementary school, we took a camping trip out at Mount Charleston and saw UFOs there. Bright lights in the sky that hovered in place for minutes at a time, then abruptly darted across the sky, stopped on a dime, rinsed, repeated, and practically vanished when they took off. And to this day, I sometimes wake up with the feeling that it's happened again. Another freaky thing that happened to me, and I can't even call this one a dream because it sure as fuck wasn't, happened when I was around 14. I woke up to the sensation of my entire body being totally numb. So much so that when I got out of bed, I didn't even feel my feet touch the floor, even though I heard the thump and saw them. So numb that walking felt like gliding from the lack of sensation. Anyway, the air in my room was on fire, with this buzzing that felt like hot electricity, and I could sense the most hostile presence I've ever felt coming from my bedroom window. So I decided to nope out of there. As I headed for the door, I felt this hot electric shiver run up my spine and the back of my neck, making my hair stand on end, and I could hear something or someone talking. It sounded like human speech, and it didn't. It was like 1,000 voices at once, and it was like one voice, and it sounded angry, like hissing, and it sounded like human speech but in no language I could understand, and it didn't sound like any human voice I had ever heard. It sounded like I was being spoken to, like this fucker was breathing right down my neck, but it had to be in my head because if it was as loud as I heard it, the whole house would have been woken up. Anyway, I got the hell out and didn't go back into my room all night. That's kind of all I've got for now, except for what I know about my family. Like I said already, My dad doesn't even deny that this shit exists, and he saw those ones with me on that camping trip. He doesn't talk about it often, and if I bring up the subject, he's good at answering without answering. But sometimes, if we're watching the stars or on a long road trip together at night, he'll say a few things. For one, I know that he's been seeing UFOs since he was a kid too. He lived in LA until high school though, and that's where he first saw one to my knowledge. On top of that, according to my uncle, his brother, he used to insist that there were aliens living underground out in the desert. Considering where most of what I experienced went on, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. As for my sisters, we don't talk about it, but they were there on the camping trip. They've seen moving stars, and my youngest sister used to sleep with a wrench under her pillow. I should also mention that when we lived by the hog farm, we were also followed by black helicopters. I remember my dad losing the blinds when they made passes, and they used to follow our van on the way to school sometimes. Not sure if that's related, but it creeps me the hell out. Anyway, moral of the story, if you want to see weird shit, come to Nevada.
So, yeah, I don't really believe in this shit, but one time I really saw something strange. 2 years ago, in Sweden, I had a break from Heroes of Newarth. I went out on the balcony to take a cigarette and I saw something. There was something falling from the sky. It was round and it was glowing. I swear to God I was prepared for an impact, but there was nothing. Nothing happened. The thing that fell was about 10% the size of a full moon, so it wasn't an asteroid or anything like that. It disappeared when the nearby church tower blocked my vision. I rushed to my computer to try to find something on Google about asteroids or anything like that falling this month, but couldn't find anything. Couldn't find any info. If it would have been an asteroid, the impact would have been devastating. One of the explanations must be aliens or something. I can't make this more clear. I am not into weird shit like this. Stuff like this doesn't make me hard or anything like that. I always try to find other realistic reasons, but that one time, just can't really explain it.
I have lived most of my life in California and Nevada, near places that are supposed to be hotspots of UFO activity. But I never saw any UFOs, and certainly not for lack of trying. I always wanted to see one, and would always look for them when looking at the sky. My personal opinion is still that the UFO phenomenon is undeniable, due to the wide breadth of evidence from air traffic controllers and militaries around the world. But I also believe that the nature of UFOs is disputable. As for encounters with aliens, the closest experience I've had to that was probably sleep paralysis. A few times I would wake up in the middle of the night and my covers would be pulled over my face, but my room would be filled with a blue glow. I wouldn't be able to move. I had the distinct feeling there was someone else in the room. One time I managed to fight it enough to push the covers off of me, but I don't remember anything after that. Mostly it is consistent with sleep paralysis, but deep down I always wondered if it was some kind of abduction experience. For a while, this caused me a deep subconscious fear. I would get anxiety if I tried to go to bed early. I would stay up late because nothing would come in the night if I was awake all night. I would become very afraid every time I was about to sleep. Then there have been a couple times when I woke up and saw dark figures. One time it just walked away, and the other time I sat up and yelled, "What the fuck? What the fuck?" and then threw a pillow at it. Of course there was nothing there. I guess this is a classic waking up shadow person experience. Besides that, I've had an encounter with so-called men in black, but it was as a kid, and because my dad worked as a contractor with the US Air Force on top-secret projects. We got visits from Air Force intelligence a few times, but one time very strange acting men in suits showed up at our very rural home. Honestly, there isn't much to say about it.
I have one. I don't know for sure if it was alien, but it was odd. My dad is a pilot and very into astronomy. He has a ranch on 10 wooded acres in a town called Harper, in Texas. It's a very small, in the middle of nowhere town, in the hill country, neighbors are far apart, very dark, etc., etc. Anyway, I was staying out there once and he told me to come outside, around 11 p.m., and to look at something he's been seeing for the past few nights. We could see 2 small points of light about 2 feet away from each other, from our point of view, of course. One would flash 3 or 4 times, then move down quickly, then the other would flash maybe 3 times, and move sideways, and then up. Then they would disappear. We just dismissed it as dying stars or shooting stars, but the way they flashed and moved was weird. He says he sees this in different parts of the sky about 3 times a week.
I have experienced a number of unusual sightings here in the backwoods of Pennsylvania, in different regions of the state, including one very close encounter. The first experience I encountered was at a cabin my dad and I visited to fish, this incident being during the night of the 4th of July, and is located on the edge of the Tuscarora State Forest, which covers almost 100,000 acres. I was about 13 at the time, and my dad and I were the only ones on the property. It's gated and we had a dog, plus there's no accessing that part of the mountain with vehicles or we'd know. It was in the early morning hours, maybe 2 a.m., and we were watching the stars. At our position, the cabin is on the base of a mountain, Kittatinny Mountain, in a valley. As we were stargazing, I first caught a glimpse of something that was too bright to be a star, and I could tell it was sitting over the mountain, casting light onto the trees below it. It was a solid white ball of light. I tipped off my dad and we quickly dismissed it being a helicopter even though we're close to an army depot and base, as it was only about 1.5 miles away and the rotors would have made a sound, plus it stayed in a fixed position. It stayed in the same position for about 30 minutes before simply disappearing. I didn't sleep well that night. To note, I think it was attracted to fireworks someone in the valley were setting off, occasionally lighting up the sky with large, bellowing explosions. This was not the first experience with this large ball of light. Some years later, we came face to face with it. This is by far the most disturbing incident I've had with UFOs, the others being just weird shit I've seen in the sky, but this was an encounter that showed sentience. On the edge of the property is a large area where we chainsaw felled trees for firewood. It's a few hundred yards from the cabin itself and sits slightly up the mountain on the edge of a large meadow, the forest rising just above the pit. I was 18 at the time and accompanied by my dad. We had taken the four-wheeler to collect some wood for a bonfire to celebrate the first day of trout season. It was early evening, and we had just finished stacking the final logs on the four-wheeler and stopped to drink a beer and talk, when I noticed at the same spot, sitting above the mountain, was the light. We couldn't take our eyes off of it when it started to glide over the trees, maybe 100 feet off the canopy, clearing a good mile in less than 10 seconds till it was only about 100 feet above our heads. Me and my dad's first reaction in panic, he unholstered his 1911 and I grabbed the M14. We panic as this light now was the size of a house, maybe 75 feet diameter, a perfect ball, glowing that eerie whitish-blue hue that LEDs give off, but giving off an unusual cycling hum like when you can hear a washing machine from rooms away. It sat motionless, and like the one anon before mentioned with encountering beings, the air felt electric. Strangest of all, other than the hum, it was like we were in a vacuum, this thing sucking all atmospheric sounds out of the air, as if everything was muted, if that makes sense. It sat above us for only a minute, and then shot over the mountain on a direct 45-degree angle directly into the sky in seconds, not making a sound. We didn't have any lost time, and we didn't sleep that night. The ones I was wondering if anyone else has seen are bright flashes, always orangish red and lasting for a few seconds, growing in intensity several magnitudes and then quickly fading with no sound. They weren't iridium flares. I've always experienced them on foggy nights, and they've always have occurred over a waterway, in this case the Susquehanna River. They always have reminded me of what the old military videos of upper atmospheric nuke tests looked like. In fact, the first time I ever saw one, I thought it was a nuke, and freaked out for a few seconds. The final thing that I'll report was seen by my dad back in the late 1980s in the northern tier of Pennsylvania. Going from memory, my dad was driving in Potter County sometime in the early morning hours, with a truck ahead of him, no other vehicles around and no buildings anywhere, as this is a desolate region. He had told me that he witnessed a neon lime green ball of light flying parallel to the highway a few hundred feet up, keeping up with his speed. It started to descend and gain speed, getting past the truck in front of him. My dad thought it was a plane getting ready to crash until he noticed it was dripping glowing green plasma don't know what to call it, dripping onto the highway and descending on a direct path down in a heavily wooded valley where it went dark. My dad also noted that the truck ahead of him saw this green stuff splashing as it hit its brakes, only to speed off in a nope fashion. I've seen other small stuff that was weird in the sky, but nothing really worth noting. Lights taking sharp angles at high speeds, etc. Having let my dad read over that green fireball article, of which he's never heard of the incident stated therein before, says that it is quite fitting to what he saw, with descriptions like self-disintegrating and an aimed sort of trajectory. Weird stuff. I wonder what they mean or are. This picture, he says, is what it looked like, from what we could scrounge on Google Images. He said it didn't have a long, defined tail and addendum, said it almost moved as if it was a stone skipping on water, till he lost sight of it going down into the tree line.
My grandfather, farmer from rural Poland, saw some crazy shit in his life, starting with weird cloud formations the day World War II started, depicting armies clashing. He wrote a letter to his brother in Warsaw the same day, saying what he saw and how he had a bad feeling. He had no radio, and the papers said anything about war a few weeks later. Plus, he claimed to have seen a silver saucer-shaped object maybe 2 meters high, rolling on its side through a field around 1946, kind of humming and minding its own business, like it was on a stroll. What always makes me think twice about the things he saw was the fact he had no sources to ever hear or read about flying saucers, aliens, and whatever else. He was a freaking farmer in rural Poland, and he died before I picked up the whole UFO obsession.
I've seen a few weird things before. I'm sure you've all seen those white ball UFOs that fly around and seem to replicate themselves. I have seen those outside when I had insomnia, during the summer at maybe 5 in the morning. I even found a video on YouTube of somebody filming the same thing in the same place I saw it. Around the same area, behind my house, I have seen a floating, glowing orange ball out in a field. It was about the size of a beach ball, and it was there for about an hour, I think. It seemed like it was floating around the field, which is on top of a hill. I didn't watch it much, and I didn't bring it up to anyone in case I was hallucinating or something. I used to also see small blue lights, very blue, and about the size of a golf ball, but oval-shaped. They would sit on the wall just above head height but out of reach, and I never worked out what they were being reflected from, if that was the case at all. I'd always have my curtains closed at night, and it seemed to be random when they would appear. I tried to block the light with my hand a few times when I felt brave, but didn't manage to. It seemed like it was on the wall rather than being projected onto it. Sometimes they would fade away after I looked at them for a minute or two. It was weird, and I am glad I haven't seen them in a long time. These were all a few years ago and all around the same time. But I haven't seen such things in years. I think my brother has seen blue lights in his bedroom too, but it was behind me when my back was turned, so I can't confirm it was the same thing. And that was very recent. Maybe this year.
I live in Ohio, around the age of 5, so it's around 11 o'clock or so, and I'm tossing and turning and I just can't get to sleep. I look at the clock, stare at the ceiling, etc. My dad lived with my grandma, and so did I because of the current divorce, and so my room was close to my grandma, and my dad's room was in the basement. So I'm looking across the hall, and near the foot of the bed I see this figure. I keep looking and squinting, and it looks back at me. I could see the reflection of its eyes and was almost like a typical tall gray alien. So I start panicking as the kid I was, and started crying. My dad and grandmother were still up and rushed to me asking what's wrong. I tell them there's something near my grandma's bed. Nothing was there, but they said that the window was somewhat open. That's really the only story I've had. Maybe someday I'll have a better one.
I live in New Zealand, and a few years ago I was staying in a small city called Palmerston North. I consider myself a bit of an aircraft buff and have been into astronomy for as long as I can remember. So like OP, I know the difference between a plane, satellite, star, etc. It was about 10 p.m. when I went outside for a smoke. As I was puffing away, I looked up into the sky as you do, and noticed a single point of light moving across the sky from north to south. I thought it was just an airliner as it moved at the speed of 1, and seemed to be at a similar altitude to one, except that it had no collision lights on just a single point of light. I didn't think anything of it until I noticed a second object similar to the first, except this one was moving much, much faster, and I soon realized it was on an intercept course with the first object. I watched, and sure enough, it was heading towards the first. Object ID, say from its 7 or 8 o'clock, when the second object was maybe 2 hand widths, hand held out at arm's length, away from the first. The first object almost instantaneously changed its direction from south to west, and at the same time accelerated almost instantaneously to a speed greater than that of the second object. The second object sped up and chased the first. Within maybe 10 or so seconds, they were gone over the horizon. I never told anyone about this until now. What did I see? /X/.
Auckland Fren here. Got a pretty messed up story. Well, to me, anyway. Had a dream that my mum was driving me home from karate about 8:30 p.m. When we were nearly home, we saw this UFO in the sky. I'm talking so massive and so close, about 5 meters, that you can see the panel work on the craft. Paralyzed with fear and starting shaking faster and faster, felt like I was about to be abducted out of my body, and then I woke up in bed. I was only 11 and lived out in Hunua in the Wops. Stepdad issues and dramas, basically didn't talk to my mum for 4 years, and then after reconciling, watched the fourth kind together one night, her, me, and my missus. The part where it says, "How could I remember what I was made to forget?" urged my mum to, right then and there, tell me about her dream of a UFO on the way back from karate, and I instantly became covered in goosebumps. I had told nobody, easily the most eerie moment of my life.
Why all the Kiwis here tonight? Another Auckland friend here. 2 years ago, I saw a strange object in the sky. It looked like a large silver bullet, or a plane without wings or a tail, and was extremely shiny and reflective. This was in the middle of the day, and also flew overhead very quickly. The sound it made was much fainter and more high-pitched than a regular plane. People I've told say military aircraft, but we don't have much military budget. So it's either extraterrestrial or another country is sending secret military craft over New Zealand.
I think quite a bit of UFO phenomena goes on in New Zealand, to be honest. Tons of people I know have seen weird shit. If it's military, though, it's definitely the US's. I used to live in Chichech near the airport, and the amount of Hercules they fly down to Antarctica is just ridiculous. No way it's only for penguins and shit.
Be me, 17, at Sonic with friends. The guy starts yelling, "What the hell is that?" Large triangular arrangement of multicolored lights is flying low but quickly across the sky, completely silent. I couldn't tell if it was several different craft or one craft with lights on it. Disappears over the tree line. About 16 other people saw it too. I'm really curious as to what they thought about it, considering everyone seems to have forgotten it even happened.
I once saw a bright, deep pinkish light through the blinds, and I figured it was a car, but was confused as to why it was pink. That night, I woke up face down and not being able to move, and vibrating. Similar to when your leg falls asleep, but like everywhere. I realised that there was distance between me and the bed, as in, I was floating. I could move my eyes, so I looked to the right as much as I could because I felt something there. There were two human-like beings, but they were blurry and black. It seemed like they realised I was conscious, and I felt them lunge at me, but not physically. Strange sensation. I clenched my eyes and tried to scream. Next thing I know, it's the morning. Figured it was a weird dream. Then I noticed I had a perfectly circular bruise on each of my inner arms, by the bicep, in the exact same location. I was scared but curious as to WTF happened.
What's my alien abduction story? Be me, average kissless virgin neat, going for a walk because I literally have nothing better to do. Run into my meth head neighbor, live in a shitty neighborhood but I have a good build so never had issues, and he starts spouting if the aliens got me too. Humor him because fuck it, see above. Ask him what aliens he's talking about. Said they kidnapped him in the night, experimented on his body and pumped him full of drugs. OK.jpg. Shows me a golf ball-sized divot on his side that looks freshly cauterized. Says that's where they stuck him with their prober and made him do all these weird tests. The poor soul probably had surgery and forgot about it because he's high on meth. Tell him I'll keep an eye out. Head back home. Decide to follow his example and get fucked up. Take a couple of edibles and game all night long. Later I'm in bed and the eddies are pretty much run their course. It's around 1:20 in the morning. Start hearing this humming noise out my window. Whatintarnation.mov. Grab my gun cause I'm not in California and carefully look under my blinds. Pitch black. Seriously, I couldn't see a thing. It was like a void outside. I couldn't even see the fence to my yard and it's 10 feet away. Just pure blackness. Freak the hell out. Try to calm myself down and that it's the eddies and I'm just having a panic attack. Humming turns to this eye-watering cringe noise like nails on a chalkboard times 100. Whole room starts to vibrate. Hear a slam on my door, heart pounding in my chest. I point my gun at the door, yelling slurs to scare off whoever thinks this is fucking funny. Vibrating intensifies, and the noise is blurring my vision. There's a light under my door, blinds me completely, and I pass out. I woke up the next morning in my bed, naked. Had weird dreams of floating and being inside out but feeling no pain. I remember screaming, but that's it. Blame the whole thing on the eddies. I suddenly found a golf ball-sized hole on my right side just under my ribcage. Literally shit the bed. I'm still fucking shook. I'm 90% sure it was drugs and I hurt myself somehow or my fucking meth head neighbor is fucking with me. Any similar experiences to this? Am I crazy?
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.